In 2005, Daniel, Marcus, Emily, and Claire set off into the Grand Canyon and never came back. For years, their families mourned until 2012, when Claire staggered out of the desert alone. Her body was scarred, her hair streaked with gray, and her eyes carried something no one could explain. What she whispered about caves, markings, and the night her friends vanished one by one left investigators shaken, and locals convinced the canyon itself had chosen who to give back. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. The summer of 2005 burned hot over Arizona, the kind of heat that shimmered off the road and made car engines groan. 4 friends, Daniel, Marcus, Emily, and Claire, decided it was the perfect time for an adventure. They weren't kids anymore. They were in their 20s, young enough to feel invincible but old enough to crave a story worth telling. And for them, that story would be the Grand Canyon. Locals at the edge of the park told them what they told every tourist: stick to the marked trails, respect the heat, and don't get clever. But the friends laughed it off. They had maps, gear, water bottles, and more confidence than caution. What could go wrong? At a gas station just outside Tucson, a pair of old-timers watched the group pack up their SUV. One muttered to the other, "They'll learn quick. Canyon doesn't like show-offs." The other only shook his head, his cigarette ash trembling as if the words were heavier than he wanted to admit. The friends hiked down past the crowds, further than the sunburned families snapping pictures at the rim. Dust clung to their sneakers, sweat pooled beneath their shirts, but they were smiling, laughing, passing snacks back and forth. Claire, the most cautious of the group, kept glancing at the trail markers, her fingers brushing them as if to reassure herself they were still there. Daniel teased her for it, calling her the mother hen. But something about the canyon resisted their laughter. The silence between gusts of wind felt too deep, too absolute, like a giant holding its breath. The cliffs glowed red and gold in the sun, but the shadows beneath jutted dark and endless. At night, when they camped by a flat stretch of stone, the stars looked so sharp it felt like they might slice the sky open. On the second evening, Marcus pulled out a folded map and pointed toward an unmarked ridge. "Shortcut," he grinned, his voice echoing against stone walls. Emily laughed. "Wow, the last thing we need is a shortcut out here." But Daniel's adventurous streak won out. He wanted to push further, deeper, past the tourists, into places few dared to step. By morning, they packed up camp and veered from the marked trail. The air was drier, the ground uneven. Claire frowned as she adjusted her backpack straps. "Feels wrong out here," she whispered, but no one responded. They were already too far in to turn back. Behind them, the main trail disappeared. Ahead, the Grand Canyon opened its jaws wider. The friends didn't know it yet, but every step they took led them closer to a place that had swallowed countless souls before, and had no intention of letting all of them go. The further they hiked from the marked trail, the more the world seemed to shift around them. The comforting sound of other hikers faded until it was just the crunch of their boots and the ragged pull of breath in the desert heat. Even the air felt different. Thin, dry, and edged with something Claire swore smelled metallic, like blood on a hot coin. At first, they joked to keep spirits high. Marcus snapped photos, balancing on rocks and yelling, "This one's gonna look sick on the wall." Emily hummed under her breath, trying to chase the silence away. Daniel led confidently, compass in hand, calling back, "See? Easy shortcut." But shortcuts in the canyon aren't just dangerous. They're final. By mid-afternoon, their map no longer matched what they saw. The ridge twisted into a maze of stone spires and narrow ledges. At one point, Daniel crouched, squinting at faint scratches carved into the rock. "Trail markers?" he asked, but the lines looked too crude, too scattered, like claws had dragged through the stone. Water ran low faster than they expected. Emily paused to sip from her bottle, tilting it only to realize it was already near empty. She pressed her lips together and said nothing, but Claire noticed, her jaw tightening. By the third day, arguments bubbled. Marcus wanted to keep pushing. He swore the river had to be close. Daniel snapped back that they needed to conserve strength. Emily tried to break it up, but even her voice cracked with exhaustion. Claire muttered under her breath, "We should have turned back," though no one answered her. Then the strange signs began. At dawn, they found Marcus's camera missing, though he swore he'd zipped it in his pack. At dusk, Daniel heard what sounded like footsteps pacing just beyond the firelight, but when he turned, only shadows pressed against the stone walls. By the fourth morning, their campfire was cold, and Emily's scarf, bright red, impossible to miss, was gone. Claire searched the ground, her fingers tracing small indentations in the dust. They looked like prints, bare prints. That night, the canyon swallowed their laughter completely. Their voices bounced back hollow, like they were speaking into something vast and waiting. And then, just like that, they were gone. 7 years is enough time for people to stop waiting. By 2012, the case of the 4 vanished friends had been stamped unsolved. The families held vigils, pinned fading flyers on bulletin boards, and eventually accepted what no one wanted to say aloud. They weren't coming back. But in the summer of 2012, just as the desert baked under another brutal season, one of them did. Claire staggered into a ranger station at the edge of the park. She was thinner than anyone remembered, her skin weathered, hair streaked with gray that didn't match her age. Her boots were torn, laces replaced with strips of fabric. She clutched a water jug with trembling fingers like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. The rangers froze. They recognized her instantly. The mother hen of the group, the cautious one. When they asked where she'd been, she whispered, "Still there." News exploded overnight. Families who'd long buried hope rushed back. Reporters swarmed the dusty roads, shoving microphones at anyone willing to talk. And behind closed doors, investigators circled her like hawks, desperate for answers. But Claire wasn't eager to give them. At first, she said little, just fragments. "We went off the trail. We found something we shouldn't have." Her voice cracked as if the words themselves had weight. Doctors who examined her noted scars along her arms, not from falls or scrapes, but thin and deliberate, like marks pressed into her over and over. Her nails were broken, as though she'd clawed at stone. And her eyes carried something that made even the most seasoned detectives shift in their chairs. When she finally spoke more, it wasn't about survival. It was about fear. "It wasn't just us out there," she whispered during one late-night interview. Something else was watching. It didn't want us to leave, but every time she approached the part everyone wanted. What exactly happened to Daniel, Marcus, and Emily? Her throat locked. She'd press her lips tight, shake her head, and mutter, "Not yet." Locals whispered again, louder than before. In diners and gas stations, people leaned close to one another. She came back wrong. She left the others behind. Maybe the canyon gave her back, but it didn't do it for free. For Claire, returning wasn't the end of the nightmare. It was the beginning of the telling. And each word she held back only deepened the canyon's shadow. It took weeks before Claire said more. Doctors insisted she was physically stable, but mentally, no one could agree. Some called it trauma-induced hysteria. Others whispered she was holding back because the truth was too awful to survive. Finally, in a dimly lit room, she started to speak, not in one clean story, but in pieces, like shards of glass, sharp and incomplete. She said they had followed Marcus toward a ridge where the map no longer mattered. The air had grown colder, unnaturally so. Echoes didn't return right. They stretched, bent, like the canyon was repeating them wrong. Then they found the cave. Hidden behind a spill of rocks, it looked ordinary until they stepped closer. Strange markings etched into the stone, spirals, jagged lines, shapes that didn't match any tribe or traveler. Daniel joked about treasure, but no one laughed. The walls seemed to hum. Inside, the cave forked into narrow tunnels. Claire begged them not to go further, but Daniel's flashlight beam had already cut ahead. She swore the deeper they went, the more the light dimmed, like the dark wasn't just absence but alive, pressing back. One by one, her friends slipped away. Marcus vanished first. He was only a few feet ahead, his camera light bobbing, when it suddenly winked out. They called his name, searched the walls, but only silence answered. Then came a sound, like something dragging stone across stone, but not Marcus's voice. Emily disappeared next. Claire said she turned for a moment to adjust her pack. When she looked back, Emily's scarf lay crumpled on the ground, but Emily herself was gone. Daniel stayed with her the longest. She remembered his hand gripping hers so tight it hurt, his breath harsh in the cave. Then, when Claire finally spoke the rest, her voice cracked like a brittle branch. She hadn't wanted to tell it, not because she didn't remember, but because remembering felt like inviting it back. She said the canyon wasn't just rock and silence. It was something older, something that watched. That cave wasn't a shelter. It was a mouth. And once they stepped inside, it marked them. The days bled together. Hunger gnawed, thirst burned, But worse than that was the feeling that every step forward was being measured. She said she felt counted, like the canyon was deciding who belonged to it. When Daniel vanished, Claire didn't scream. She was too far gone for that. She only sat against the cold wall, her hands shaking as she wrote his name into the dirt, as if refusing to let the canyon erase him completely. And then, she was alone. She wandered back toward the light, but the cave twisted, folding into paths she didn't remember. Her compass spun uselessly. She followed whispers that might have been her own voice, echoed back wrong. Days passed, maybe weeks, until, finally, she emerged, skin blistered by sunlight, her clothes torn and clinging. The canyon had released her. But why her? That was the question that haunted her every moment since. "I think it wanted someone left behind," she told investigators at last. "Someone to carry the story." Her words landed like stones. Not everyone believed her. Some said guilt had warped her memory. Others whispered she'd sacrificed the others to save herself. But the look in her eyes silenced even the cruelest gossip. It wasn't the look of a liar. It was the look of someone who had seen too much. Authorities closed the file as partial resolution, noting only, 3 remain missing, 1 survivor returned. But locals weren't satisfied. Around campfires at the canyon's rim, they repeated Claire's words. It chose. To this day, hikers avoid that ridge. Guides warn visitors not to chase shortcuts, not to stray from the markers. And every so often, someone swears they hear it, an echo that isn't quite their own, slipping back from the canyon walls. Claire never returned to the Grand Canyon. She lived quietly, far from the desert. But in interviews, she carried one unshakable truth. The canyon doesn't just take lives. It keeps them. And with 3 souls still unaccounted for, maybe it isn't finished yet. The canyon gave Claire back, but it never returned Daniel, Marcus, or Emily. Some say it wasn't chance. It was choice. And if the canyon chooses, then maybe it isn't finished yet. If this story sent chills down your spine, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more haunting disappearances and shocking revelations. Because the next story might prove some places were never meant to let people leave.